culture is by saying, well, what does the science tell us about the world? And how does it show us that God exists? And that's the teleological argument. I find all sorts of ways to be in awe of nature. Up here, we have a slide. It's from the Hubble telescope of NASA. It's called the Pillars of Creation. And what you're looking at is a giant cluster of hydrogen gas and space dust, basically. But inside these formations, you have the cradle, the birthplace of stars. And to give you a sense, and this might be hard to imagine, but just one of those pillars right there is up to 4 light years long. Right? It takes light, the fastest thing in the universe, 4 years to travel the length of that formation. Right? You think that even the Earth is big, right? Small potatoes, right, compared to this formation. The Milky Way galaxy is over 100,000 light years in diameter. It contains about 400 billion stars, plus or minus several hundred billion. The scale of the universe, I think, is truly amazing, right? And when we look at the universe, no doubt we might break out like the psalmist or Paul, right? In Psalm 19, 1 through 2, when he wrote, "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." Right, Romans 1:20, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have clearly been seen, being understood through what has been made so that they are without excuse." It is these thoughts which are the inspiration for the teleological argument, which argues that we have evidence that God exists because of the complexity and design of the universe. Now let me focus on some, I can't do them all today, but some of the aspects of our universe that just beg for an explanation. One of them is the physical constants that we find. So there's a number of constants in physics. These are numbers that don't change, that's why they're called constant. For example, the gravitational constant, right, is 6.6741 times 10 to the negative 11th. That's its precise amount. And it doesn't ever change. There's a number of these. And what's interesting is that they seem to be brute facts. They don't admit of yet a further explanation. Right? They just, when we look out in the world, we just find that the constants are what they are. This is true for the cosmological constant. It's true for the distribution of matter, the beginning of the universe. And these constants, I mean, in and of itself, them being brute might not seem very important, but they have to be so precise for life to exist as well. This is what's amazing. If gravity was just a wee bit weaker, right, just 1 to, I think I read 10 to the 80th, right? Just a tiny, tiny infinitesimal fraction weaker. All matter would fly apart. We couldn't be us. We couldn't build this church, we wouldn't have the earth, we wouldn't have anything. If it was just a little bit stronger, we'd all be collapsed, right? All the matter would be smushed up. It never could escape from itself. Everything is perfect. The result of life and the result of where we are now. And it just seems to be a miracle. It's like winning millions of lotteries in a row. Right? We've hit the real cosmological jackpot. Right? But what do you think something's up if you won the Texas lottery? And then you won it again, and you won it again, and you won it like 100 times in a row? What if you think that the game is rigged? And it's not just like Christians that say something's up. Paul Davies, who's an astrophysicist at Arizona State University, wrote the following in the Guardian newspaper. "Scientists are slowly waking up to an inconvenient truth. The universe looks suspiciously like a fix. The issues concerning the very laws of nature themselves. For 40 years, physicists and cosmologists have been quietly collecting examples of all too convenient coincidences and special features of the underlying laws of the universe that seem to be necessary in order for life and hence conscious beings to exist. Change any one of them, and the consequences would be lethal." Fred Hoyle, the distinguished cosmologist, once said it was as if a super intellect has monkeyed with physics. And indeed, the super intellect has monkeyed with physics, and even he wrote the laws. And I think the universe is fine-tuned. When we look at what science gives us, I think there's good evidence that something is up, right? That we have great evidence of design. I just touched on that argument. And I hope I've convinced you a little bit today that we should engage our culture with compassionate communication, and that perhaps apologetics would be a useful tool for you. God has the power to transform lives, and it's our great privilege to participate in that process. And so let me say, if arguments like these interest you, what should you do? Well, first, I think it's great that the internet exists. I kid you not. For someone who's interested in these things, you can learn about it today even. One good website I would point you to if you're ever interested in apologetics or learning more about this argument and other arguments is one by William Lane Craig. It's at reasonablefaith.org. You can just Google reasonable faith and you'll find it. Bill Craig's a great guy. He's actually a professor at HBU. And he has a huge amount of resources available there. Lots of great videos and articles and Q&As that he does and everything else. Second, make sure you form relationships with non-believers and ask them questions, right? Remember those questions that Mary Jo suggested. You don't have to know the answer, right? If you don't know the answer, the best response is, gosh, that's a great question. Let's go find out the answer together, right? I too am interested in that. Right? Let's go figure that out. And finally, and it's probably no surprise I wouldn't like this, but I encourage you to come visit us over at the college. Right, we have different events. Lee Strobel, who's a great evangelist and communicator, has a class open to the public every semester. I think there's a lot of great ways you can get engaged, but through websites, through making relationships, through educating yourself, I think we'll be part of God's plan and His plan of redemption for the world. Right? We can compassionately communicate with our neighbors. So bless you. Thank you for having me today. I'll turn over to our great worship team.